You know what Australians don't talk about with tourists? The towns where something went wrong. Not wrong like the pub closed down. Wrong like entire populations vanished. Wrong like locals still won't drive through after dark, even though they can't explain exactly why. Australia has over 15,000 small towns and settlements scattered across 7.7 million square kilometres. Most are exactly what you'd expect. Friendly, quiet, unremarkable. But some of them are different. Some have histories that locals refuse to discuss. Some have atmospheres that make even skeptics uncomfortable. Some have warnings passed down through generations. Don't stop here after dark. Don't go near that building. Don't ask about what happened. Some involve recent crimes where victims' families are still alive. This is not a list of supposedly haunted hotels trying to attract tourists. This is documented history. Court records, scientific papers on unexplained phenomena, and the consistent testimony of people who live in or near these places and who will tell you quietly that something is wrong here. 18 locations, ranked from unsettling to genuinely disturbing, starting now. At number 18, we have Wycliffe Well in the Northern Territory. Population, somewhere between 8 and 12 permanent residents. Location, 380 kilometres south of Darwin on the Stuart Highway, which is one of the most isolated roads on Earth. This is the self-proclaimed UFO capital of Australia. And here is the thing, the sightings have been documented consistently for over 80 years. The Roadhouse keeps a logbook. It contains thousands of entries going back to the 1940s when this was a World War II supply station. Witnesses include truck drivers, police officers, pilots, and military personnel. I spoke to someone who worked at the Roadhouse who said the logbook is not a joke. People come in shaking. A family from Melbourne refused to continue driving at 9 p.m, insisting on waiting until daylight. The reports describe lights that move wrong, that stop and start, that follow vehicles for kilometres and then vanish. The trade-off is the isolation itself. If you break down between Alice Springs and Darwin after dark, you may wait hours for help. Several people have disappeared on this stretch of highway over the decades. The locals say, do not drive at night if you can avoid it. That warning is about kangaroos and fatigue officially. Unofficially, there are other reasons. At number 17, Farina in South Australia. Population 0, a ghost town 550 kilometres north of Adelaide. The name means flower because optimistic settlers in 1878 believed they could grow wheat in the desert. They could not. At its peak, Farina had 600 residents, 2 hotels, a bank, a school, and an underground bakery where workers baked at night to escape a daytime heat of 50 degrees. The town suffered repeated droughts, rabbit plagues, and eventually the railway bypassed it. The last residents left in the 1950s. What remains are stone ruins slowly being reclaimed by red desert and a cemetery with tiny graves. Infant mortality was catastrophic. I spoke with a volunteer restoration worker who said you feel the history here. Standing in the cemetery, looking at those tiny graves, knowing the hope these people had and how it ended. The surrounding station owners say the town has an atmosphere, especially at dusk. Some will not camp there overnight. There are reports of sounds of children, footsteps in empty buildings, and lights in windows. The trade-off is summer temperatures that can kill you. Visit from April to September only. At number 16, Ravenswood in Queensland. Population 190 people, living among the ruins of a town that once had 4,500. The cemetery contains over 2,000 graves for a town that never exceeded 4,500 residents. That mortality rate tells you everything about the gold rush. Mining disasters killed hundreds, cave-ins, floods, silicosis. The graves kept filling. The town never officially died, but it never recovered. 2 pubs still operate among the ruins. The pub owner told a local history publication that hundreds of men died underground here, and that does not just go away. He has heard things he cannot explain, but he learned not to make a fuss about it. The trade-off is genuine danger from unmarked mine shafts on the outskirts. Do not walk around at night. At number 15 is Walhalla in Victoria. Population, 20 permanent residents. Distance from Melbourne, 180 kilometres. Here is what makes Walhalla genuinely unsettling. The valley is so narrow and dark that the cemetery had to be built on the only sunny hillside. That cemetery now contains over 1,200 graves for a town that currently has 20 people. The dead outnumber the living 60 to 1. In the 1880s, 4,000 people were packed into this valley chasing gold. The extended mine went down over 40 levels. The valley is so narrow that in winter sunlight only reaches the main street for a few hours each day. Historical accounts document the psychological effects of this darkness on residents. When the gold ran out, people left. What remained were the graves and the buildings pressed against the cliffs. I spoke with a ghost tour operator who has been running tours for 15 years. She said the cemetery produces something for almost every tour: cold spots that move. Photographs people show her afterward with anomalies. Either a lot of people are very good at faking, she said, or something is here. Visitors consistently report claustrophobia from the valley walls and an oppressive atmosphere in the late afternoon as light fades. The trade-off is that winter afternoons get cold and dark by 3 in the afternoon. Plan your departure accordingly. At number 14, Childers in Queensland. It had a population of 1,600. It is 300 kilometres from Brisbane. This is different from the others because the horror is recent and entirely human. On June 23, 2000, a man named Robert Paul Long set fire to the Palace Backpackers Hostel at 12:30 a.m. 15 young travellers died. Their ages ranged from 17 to 34. They came from Australia, the UK, the Netherlands, Japan, Korea, Ireland, and Israel. Long had been asked to leave the hostel earlier that day. He set the fire, then stood outside and watched. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. I read testimony from a local resident who helped in the aftermath. They had to cut through a fence to try to reach people. The screaming, they said. I will never forget that night. The town came together, but something in Childers changed forever. Today, there is a memorial where the hostel stood. The names and photos of 15 young people line the walls. A backpacker who visited in 2019 wrote that they stopped for fuel, saw the memorial without knowing what it was, read the plaques, and could not stop crying. 15 young people just like them. The trade-off here is that this is not entertainment. Locals ask that visitors treat the memorial respectfully. The anniversary on June 23rd is observed quietly. Number 13, Kapunda in South Australia. Population 3,000. It sits about 80 kilometres from Adelaide. This town has been called Australia's most haunted place. And unlike most places that claim that title, Kapunda has the investigation documentation to make it interesting. The town was founded in 1838 and became Australia's first successful copper mining centre. There have been multiple documented deaths at sites now reported haunted. 2 men were hanged at the old jail. In 1999, body parts from the Snowtown murder victims were found in a Kapunda mine shaft, adding modern horror to a location already allegedly saturated with the old kind. Paranormal investigators say Kapunda consistently produces more recordable phenomena than any other Australian location they have investigated. One visitor on a ghost tour wrote on TripAdvisor that they were a total skeptic before this. Something touched their shoulder in the North Kapunda Hotel when they were alone in a corner. No one was near them, and the guide had not even started the scary parts yet. They cannot explain it. The trade-off is that the town's marketed reputation may create expectations that influence experiences. Skeptical explanations include heritage building drafts and settling. At number 12, Junee in New South Wales. Population 6,000. It is 450 kilometres from Sydney. Junee itself is a normal country town. What puts it on this list is Monte Cristo Homestead, officially recognised as Australia's most haunted house, with documentation going back over a century. Built in 1885, Monte Cristo has accumulated at least 7 documented deaths directly connected to the property. An infant dropped down the stairs. A maid fell from the balcony. A stable boy burned to death. Harold, the mentally ill son of a caretaker, was chained in an outbuilding for 40 years and was found in a position resembling an animal. That detail alone is disturbing enough before you get to the paranormal reports. The current owners, the Ryan family, have lived there since 1963. Olive Ryan has given multiple media interviews describing 60 years of phenomena. She says the activity started immediately when they moved in, and it has never stopped. She has seen full apparitions. She has been pushed. She has heard screaming when no one was there. After 60 years, she accepts that they share the house. A paranormal investigator who conducted a formal investigation in 2019 said, "Monte Cristo delivers." In 20 years of investigation, they had never experienced a location this consistently active. Multiple team members recorded independent experiences that correlated. This house, they said, is genuine. The trade-off is that the owners have a commercial interest in maintaining the reputation, but their testimony has been consistent for 6 decades. Visitors consistently report feeling unwelcome in certain rooms and overwhelming sadness in the nursery where the infant died. At number 11, Wittenoom in Western Australia. Population is officially 0. The government says, stay away. It lies 1,400 kilometres from Perth. This is the town so deadly it was erased from maps, and the horror here is entirely documented, entirely human, and still killing people today. Wittenoom was built in 1946 to house workers at Australia's only blue asbestos mine. Blue asbestos, crucidolite, is the most deadly form. At peak operation in the 1950s, 20,000 people lived there. Internal company documents show the owners knew the asbestos was killing workers, and they continued operating anyway. Workers used asbestos bags as mattresses. Children played in tailings heaps, sliding down mountains of deadly fibre. The mine closed in 1966, but the dying continued. An estimated 2,000 former residents and workers have died from mesothelioma and asbestosis. More die every year, decades after their childhood exposure. I read testimony from a former child resident who said they used to make cubby houses from asbestos bags and slide down the tailings dumps. Everyone knew it was blue asbestos, but they were told it was safe. Now their classmates are dying, one by one. They wonder every day if they are next. The Western Australian government officially removed Wittenoom from maps in 2007. Roads are closed. The town is still contaminated. A Western Australian Health Department official stated clearly this is not a tourist destination. This is a contaminated site. There is no safe level of exposure to blue asbestos. Visiting Wittenoom could kill you decades from now. The trade-off is, there is no trade-off. Do not go. This is the only location on this list where my advice is genuine. Never visit. At number 10, Picton, New South Wales. Population is 4,500. It is 80 kilometres from Sydney. Picton is close enough to Sydney for easy day trips, and that is part of why its haunted reputation has become so well documented. Multiple locations offer commercial ghost tours. The consistency of reports across decades and thousands of visitors is what makes it interesting. The town was founded in the 1820s using convict labour. The railway arrived in 1863, cutting tunnels through sandstone ranges. Those tunnels have accumulated deaths, including railway accidents, murders, and suicides. The most famous is Emily Bollard, who was struck by a train in 1916. Her apparition, a woman in white, has reportedly been seen by hundreds of independent witnesses over the decades. A ghost tour operator told me they have conducted over 500 tours of Picton. Something happens on nearly every tour, especially in the Mushroom Tunnel. They have seen people refuse to enter before anyone has said anything scary. The visitors just feel it. A Sydney visitor wrote on a forum in 2021 that they went expecting a kitschy ghost tour. In the tunnel, clear as day, they saw a woman in white at the far end. They asked the guide who that was. The guide said there was no one there. 3 people saw her. The trade-off is that expectation shapes experience. If you go looking for ghosts in a place marketed as haunted, you may find what you are looking for regardless of whether it is there. Skeptical explanations include tunnel acoustics and wind effects, but the volume and consistency of reports and the genuine unease reported by skeptics make Picton worth consideration. At number 9 is Beechworth in Victoria. Population 4,000, distance from Melbourne 270 kilometres. This is one of Victoria's most beautiful heritage towns. It is also where 9,000 documented deaths occurred at the Mayday Hills Lunatic Asylum, and where many were buried in unmarked graves on the hillside. Let me say that again. 9,000 documented deaths in one institution, over 128 years of operation. Patients were buried in graves marked only with numbers, and many grave locations are now lost. Treatments included ice baths, prolonged isolation, physical restraints, and electroshock. By modern standards, much of what happened at Mayday Hills was torture of vulnerable people. The buildings still stand. Some are now a university campus. Some remain empty. Ghost tours have operated for more than 20 years. The founder of Asylum Ghost Tours said, "In more than 20 years of tours, they have seen people who arrived as skeptics leave convinced. This building holds something. Whether you call it ghosts or energy or residual trauma, 9,000 people died here in terrible circumstances. That leaves a mark." A former La Trobe University student wrote on Reddit that they studied there for 3 years. Late nights in the library in the old building, multiple times they heard footsteps in corridors when the building was empty. Other students had the same experiences. They did not talk about it much, but everyone knew. The trade-off is confronting what happened to mentally ill people in Australia for more than a century. The patients who died here were often poor, Indigenous, immigrant, or simply inconvenient to their families. Their suffering was systematic, not aberrant. The Grevillea wing, which housed violent patients, reportedly produces the most intense experiences. At number 8, Myall Creek in New South Wales. Population essentially 0. This is a memorial site. It is about 150 kilometres from Tamworth. This entry is different because it involves a documented historical atrocity, not paranormal claims, and I want to be clear about what we are discussing. On June 10th, 1838, a group of stockmen rode into Myall Creek Station and committed a massacre, killing at least 28 Wirirai Aboriginal people. The victims were a peaceful group camping at the station. They included women, children, and elders. The killers then burned the bodies to destroy evidence. What makes Myall Creek historically significant is what happened next. Station workers who witnessed the massacre reported it. 7 of the 11 perpetrators were eventually hanged after 2 trials. The first jury refused to convict. The second did. This was one of the only documented cases in colonial Australian history where white men were executed for killing Aboriginal people. Conservative estimates suggest over 65,000 Indigenous Australians were killed in frontier violence between 1788 and the 1930s. Almost none of those deaths resulted in any legal consequences. A memorial was established in 2000, with an annual commemoration now attended by descendants of the victims and the general public together. A Wirayarai elder interviewed by the ABC said their people died here, their children and grandchildren. This memorial matters because it tells the truth. For a long time, this was hidden and denied. Now people can come and know what happened. Visitors report profound sadness at the site. Some report unusual experiences, but I want to be careful here. This is not a location where we should be looking for ghosts as entertainment. This is a place where children were murdered and their bodies burned. The fact that it represents thousands of similar events across Australia that went unpunished and unacknowledged is the point. A visitor in 2019 wrote that as an Australian, they should have known about this. Standing at the memorial, reading the names, knowing children were murdered here, it changes you. We need more places like this that tell the true history. The trade-off is not about visiting comfort. The trade-off is confronting what actually happened in this country and deciding whether acknowledgement or continued silence serves us better. The annual commemoration on June 10th is an appropriate time to visit if you wish to participate respectfully. Otherwise, approach the memorial as what it is, a site of mass murder where justice was unusually, imperfectly achieved. Number 7. Belanglo State Forest in New South Wales, near the heritage town of Berrima. Berrima has a population of 700. It is 150 kilometres from Sydney. This is the forest where Ivan Milat buried 7 backpackers between 1989 and 1992. Their bodies were discovered in 1992 and 1993. He was convicted in 1996 and he died in prison in 2019. The victims were Caroline Clark and Joanne Walters from the United Kingdom, Simone Schmidl, Gabor Neugebauer and Anja Habschied from Germany, and Deborah Everest and James Gibson from Australia. Court records document that some victims were shot multiple times and some were stabbed. Evidence suggested some were released into the forest and hunted before being killed. Many locals will not go into Belanglo. The forest remains open for recreation, but experienced bushwalkers describe something different about it. One person wrote on Reddit that they had bushwalked all over New South Wales and that there is something about Belanglo unlike any other forest. They knew the history before they went, and maybe that affected them, but they had never felt so watched, so unwelcome. They will not go back. A police officer involved in the investigation said in a documentary that the forest felt wrong from the first day. Dense, dark, disorienting. When investigators understood what had happened there, it made a terrible kind of sense. Those young people were hunted through those trees. The trade-off is psychological. If you know the history, it will affect your experience. Dense pine forests are unsettling regardless. Belanglo is open and legal to visit, but many prefer not to. At number 6, the family properties around Lake Alden in Victoria. They are located between 150 and 200 kilometres from Melbourne. These properties were where Anne Hamilton Byrne ran a cult that obtained children through fraudulent adoptions, starved them, gave them LSD, bleached their hair to make them look identical, and told them she was Jesus Christ reincarnated. This was systematic abuse. The cult operated from the 1960s until a police raid in 1987 rescued 28 children from the Lake Alden property. The children had bleached white hair, were malnourished, and showed evidence of drug administration. Many cult members were professionals, doctors, lawyers, and nurses. They facilitated the abuse. The children were rescued. A survivor said in a documentary that they were given LSD from age 14. They were starved. They were told their aunt was Jesus. They had no concept of the outside world. Their hair was bleached so they all looked like her biological children. It was not a life. The survivor testimony is stark. A police officer involved in the 1987 raid said the children all had white blonde hair and were terrified. They had been told the outside world was evil and they did not know basic things about life. It was like stepping into another world. They were terrified. Anne Hamilton Byrne was only ever convicted of making false statements. She died in 2019. The properties are now privately owned. This is not a place for dark tourism. Survivors are still alive, and this is recent history. Watch the documentaries instead to understand what happened. The isolation that allowed this abuse to continue for decades is the same isolation that characterises so many Australian horror stories. At number 5 is Snowtown in South Australia. Population 530. It sits 145 kilometres from Adelaide. This small agricultural town became synonymous with Australia's worst serial killing, and the residents wish you would stop coming to look at an empty lot. In May 1999, police discovered 6 barrels containing 8 dismembered bodies in a disused bank vault on the main street. The investigation revealed 11 total victims killed between 1992 and 1999 by John Bunting, Robert Wagner, and accomplices. The victims were tortured before death. The killers collected their victims' social security benefits after murdering them. They stored bodies in barrels in backyards and eventually in that bank vault, while living otherwise unremarkable suburban lives. A detective involved in the investigation said in a documentary that opening those barrels is something you never recover from. What had been done to those people? The methodical cruelty. And the killers had been living normal suburban lives while doing it. Here is the thing about Snowtown that most coverage misses. The murders did not actually happen there. The town was just where bodies were stored. Snowtown became the name attached to the crimes because that is where the discovery was made. But the actual killings occurred elsewhere in suburban Adelaide. The residents of Snowtown live with a notoriety. They did not choose for crimes committed by people who were not even from their town. A Snowtown resident told the ABC in 2019 that they are sick of it. The murders did not happen here, just the storage of bodies. It could have been any town with an empty bank. But they are stuck with the name forever. People drive through just to look at an empty lot. The bank was demolished in 2009. There is nothing to see. The trade-off is ethical. Consider whether visiting serves any purpose. The empty lot where the bank stood tells you nothing you could not learn from documentaries. The locals would prefer you stayed away. If you want to understand the crimes, watch the 2011 film Snowtown or read the court records. If you want to understand the location, understand that it is a normal country town whose name was taken from it. This is different from locations where the history is distant or where tourism is welcomed as acknowledgement. The victims' families are still alive. The trauma is recent. The town did nothing wrong and carries the burden anyway. At number 4 is the Arkaroola area in the northern Flinders Ranges of South Australia. Population is near zero in the wilderness areas. Distance from Adelaide is 600 kilometres. This is ancient country, some of the oldest rocks on Earth, where unexplained lights have been documented for over a century, and multiple people have simply vanished. The mine lights are a documented phenomenon. Scientific papers have been written about them. Aboriginal traditional owners have knowledge of these lights going back thousands of years. They appear as floating lights that follow observers, approach, then retreat, and appear in impossible locations. An Arkaroola tour guide who has worked there for 15 years said they saw the Min lights 3 times. Each time, they behaved differently. Once, one followed the car for maybe 5 minutes, then vanished. You learn to accept that not everything out here can be explained. A geologist on a research expedition said the silence is the first thing you notice, then the scale, then the night sky. Then you start understanding why people have been seeing things out here for 50,000 years. The land does something to perception. The trade-off is genuine danger from extreme isolation. People have died from unprepared travel in this region. Carry a satellite phone, take extensive water, and tell someone your detailed plans. At number 3 is Port Arthur in Tasmania. The population in the broader area is 499. and it is about 100 kilometres from Hobart. This is perhaps Australia's most layered site of horror, a convict prison built on deliberate psychological cruelty, the site of Australia's worst mass shooting, and a location where ghost tours have run for over 30 years because the paranormal activity is consistent enough to support them. Port Arthur operated from 1830 to 1877 as a prison for repeat offenders. The separate prison used prolonged solitary confinement specifically designed to break prisoners' minds. It was documented as such at the time. Then on April 28, 1996, Martin Bryant killed 35 people and wounded 23 in what remains Australia's worst mass shooting. He was sentenced to 35 life sentences plus 1,035 years. A ghost tour guide with 15 years of experience said they have led thousands of tours, and something happens on nearly every one, particularly in the parsonage. They have seen people who knew nothing about the site identify the exact room where death occurred. They have seen photographs people take home that show things no one saw at the time. The trade-off is confronting both historical and recent trauma in the same location. At number 2 is the Nullarbor Plain crossing between South Australia and Western Australia. Population is near zero except at roadhouses. The distance is 1,200 kilometres of almost nothing between Adelaide and Perth. This is not a town. It is the absence of towns across a distance where people regularly vanish and strange lights are reported constantly. Help may be hours away, even if you can call for it. Multiple missing persons cases remain open. Some are suspected homicides where bodies were never recovered. A truck driver with 20 plus years on the route wrote on a forum that you learn to respect the Nullarbor. They have seen things they cannot explain. Lights that follow, then vanish. A feeling that something is wrong when nothing visible is wrong. They have also seen what happens when unprepared tourists break down out there. The road takes people. The trade-off is the genuine possibility of dying if you travel unprepared. This is not metaphorical danger. Carry water, food, fuel, and emergency communication. At number 1, Lake Ballard and the Coolyannobbing ghost town area in Western Australia. Population 0. It is 500 kilometres from Perth and 50 kilometres from the nearest settlement, Menzies, which has 100 people. This is Australia's strangest destination, a place where isolation, abandonment, ancient Aboriginal significance, and an uncanny art installation combine into something that affects nearly everyone who visits in ways they struggle to describe. Coolyannobbing is an abandoned mining town. Lake Ballard is an ancient salt lake with deep Aboriginal cultural significance. In 2003, artist Anthony Gormley installed 51 metal humanoid figures across the lake for the Perth International Arts Festival. They were never removed. The figures were created from body scans of Menzies residents. Locals turned into eternal metal sentinels standing on white salt, scattered to the horizon. An art critic who visited in 2010 wrote that they had written about art for 30 years, and this was not an aesthetic experience. This was something else. Standing among those figures at sunset, alone on a salt lake, they had no framework for what they felt. Unsettling is inadequate. Spiritual is too loaded. It simply was not like anything else. A Perth traveller wrote on Reddit in 2022 that they drove 5 hours to see it. They stayed maybe 3 hours. When they got back to the car, 6 hours had passed. Both their phones showed the same time, different from their watches by 3 hours. They do not understand it. They are not crazy. Something about that place is wrong or different. They do not know how to say it. Consistent reports include disorientation beyond what the geography should cause, time feeling distorted, sounds with no apparent source, and the figures appearing to move in peripheral vision. The isolation is profound. No phone coverage, no infrastructure. The nearest help is an hour away. The trade-off is that visiting requires serious preparation and accepting that you will be alone with something you may not fully understand. So where does this leave us? 18 locations across Australia where the tourism brochures systematically lie by omission. Massacre sites, contaminated wastelands, serial killer hunting grounds, asylums where thousands died, forests that feel wrong, plains where lights follow vehicles, and a salt lake where time itself reportedly bends. These places exist. The history is verified. The court records are public. The death tolls are documented. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, something about land that has witnessed horror seems to hold onto it in ways that affect almost everyone who visits. The locals who warn you not to stop after dark are not doing it for tourism. They are doing it because they have felt it themselves. Let me be completely honest about who this is not for. If you want comfortable travel, this is not for you. If you need ghost stories to be definitively proven or debunked, this will frustrate you. If you cannot treat massacre sites and crime locations with appropriate gravity, stay away from them. But if you want to understand what Australia actually is, beyond the beaches and the cute wildlife, these places matter. This is the shadow side of the sunburnt country, and pretending it does not exist serves no one. Have you been to any of these places? Did you feel it? Comment your experience below. I genuinely want to know what you encountered. And if you have visited somewhere that did not make this list, but should have, tell me about it. If this video helped you understand something about Australia you did not know before, consider subscribing. We cover the places and histories that mainstream travel content ignores. Hit the like button if you think this deserves to reach more people. The algorithm responds to that. See you in the next one.